Imagine it, 1944. Delegates from 44 victorious nations have gathered at the Mount Washington Hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. Inside that room, they are about to design a structural trap that will hold the global elite for the next 80 years. Britain, the world's financial superpower for over 2 centuries, is structurally broke. Its national debt has soared to 270% of GDP. Your father's pension was already priced for failure in 1971. That system is now in its final self-cannibalizing phase. You feel it, don't you? That exhausting, grinding paradox where you work harder, earn more, and yet the structural security of your life diminishes annually. You are the exhausted elite, the high performer trapped not by lack of effort, but by the illusion of permanence, the central lie of the current financial structure. The global reserve currency, the United States dollar, has been the foundation of this illusion for 8 decades. Now, the data confirms what your gut has been screaming. That foundation is eroding. The dollar's demise is not a political event. It is the predictable, non-personal consequence of imperial overextension and the self-destructive logic of debt-driven hegemony. Collapse is not an event, but the final stage of a structural design flaw. To understand the severity of our current positioning, you must first acknowledge the agenda of perpetual expansion that manufactured this vulnerability. It is a system engineered to fail, and the evidence has been written in the collapse of every preceding global power. The story begins long before Bretton Woods. It begins with the simple, fatal flaw that every hegemon succumbs to: the addiction to spending what it does not own. Consider the case of the Spanish Real de Ocho. For nearly 3 centuries, from the 16th to the 19th century, this was the first truly global currency, backed by the unimaginable wealth extracted from the mines of Potosi. The silver was the real asset. The coin was the unquestioned sovereign instrument. The Spanish Empire, as Hugh Thomas details in his Histories of the Period, possessed a financial supremacy that dwarfed its rivals. But success, as always, bred structural arrogance. The endless silver supply fostered an illusion of abundance, a belief that the underlying resource stream was infinite, thus justifying infinite military and administrative costs. King Philip II, inheriting a substantial national debt, managed to default on Spain's loans 4 separate times in the mid to late 16th century. A chilling historical precedent for a modern $37 trillion ledger. The sheer volume of incoming silver, instead of creating stability, fueled massive inflation, a toxic feedback loop of currency debasement by proxy, even while the backing asset remained physically present. The logic of imperial overstretch, a concept meticulously documented by Paul Kennedy in The Rise and Fall of the Great Powers, dictates that the military and administrative costs of maintaining a global footprint inevitably exceed the domestic economic capacity to sustain it. Spain's vast military presence across Europe and the Americas, financed by the Potosi silver, created structural debt that no amount of metal could cure once the supply peaked and the internal economy was hollowed out by inflated prices and waning domestic productivity. The silver was real, but the debt was more real. The transition to the Dutch guilder in the 17th century did not correct this core flaw. It merely sophisticated it. The Dutch Republic introduced the Fiat Illusion, the revolutionary and lethal idea of fractional reserve banking, pioneering financial instruments like the first modern stock exchange and tradable public debt. This was the shift from an aristocracy based on military might and mined assets to private conglomerates and leveraged finance, a historical observation often made by economic historians analyzing the rise of the Dutch East India Company. The guilder's supremacy, lasting roughly 78 years, was rooted in commercial innovation and trust, rather than just brute physical resource extraction. But even the world's first modern financial architects couldn't escape the pattern. The need to protect global trade routes and wage war against rising competitors, especially the Fourth Anglo-Dutch War, forced the Republic into ruinous military expenditures. The domestic financial innovation, the very engine of their reserve status, was hijacked by the external demands of military security. Debt became the new silver. The structural integrity of their commercial empire collapsed under the weight of sovereign bankruptcy and political fragmentation, paving the way for the rise of the British pound sterling, which would dominate global finance for over 2 centuries. The historical lesson is absolute. Innovation is never immune to the logic of overextension. The British pound, buttressed by the gold standard and the Industrial Revolution, achieved the longest run of any modern reserve currency, ruling from the 18th century until 1944. Its stability was so profound that, following the Great Recoinage of 1816, the pound sterling was considered synonymous with financial security. Yet, 2 world wars executed the ultimate structural decapitation. World War I exploded Britain's national debt, but it was World War II that delivered the fatal structural blow, sending government debt soaring to 270% of GDP by 1945, as confirmed by parliamentary records from the era. Britain won the war but lost its balance sheets. This brings us to the moment of betrayal for your generation. Bretton Woods, 1944. The transfer of the reserve status from the British pound to the US dollar was not a reward for victory. It was the structural recognition of a financial fatality. You were born into the successor state of a historical bankruptcy, but the American architects understood the pattern. They knew the burden of imperial overstretch would eventually break the dollar too. So, they engineered a structural bypass, a temporary fix that became the agenda of the last 50 years. The moment of truth arrived in 1971, when President Nixon unilaterally suspended the dollar's convertibility into gold. The true backing asset was removed, replaced by the Fiat Illusion, a currency backed solely by the promise of the US government. But the dollar needed a new anchor to sustain its global demand. It found it in oil. The petrodollar system, established through a strategic agreement with Saudi Arabia in the wake of the 1973 OPEC crisis, forced every nation on earth that needed energy to first acquire US dollars. This was the ultimate structural hack, manufacturing artificial global demand to sustain debt levels that would have instantly annihilated any other nation's currency. This systemic benefit is known to economists as the Exorbitant Privilege, the structural lubricant that allows the issuing country to export its inflation and finance its deficits cheaply. This privilege is the very engine that has powered the illusion of abundance and kept you on the rat race treadmill. The logic of collapse is accelerating, observable through 3 critical metrics that validate your suspicion. The logic of collapse, 3 structural fatalities. This confluence of evidence points toward a single conclusion, one rooted in the Thucydides Trap, the inevitable structural tension between a rising power block, the multipolar BRICS agenda, and an existing, overextended hegemon. The war is not fought with armies, it is fought on the balance sheet. As the historian Arnold Toynbee observed, civilizations perish by suicide, not by murder. The US dollar, having financed $8 trillion in wars and massive deficits on the back of its exorbitant privilege, is structurally committing suicide. Where does this leave us? The logic of collapse is accelerating, observable through 3 critical metrics that validate your suspicion. 1. The terminal disease of debt hegemony. The US dollar's primary vulnerability is that the structure it supports has outgrown its capacity for repayment. The debt is no longer a tool of growth. It is a structural liability. The velocity trap. The vast majority of the trillions in debt have been used not for productive, growth-enhancing infrastructure, the kind that built the original American century, but for financialization and consumption. We are financing today's spending with tomorrow's value, a practice that works only if the currency's demand remains infinite. The future is already mortgaged to the past. The interest barrier. As debt climbs past $37 trillion, the cost of servicing that debt is now rapidly approaching the cost of the entire defense budget. This creates a lethal feedback loop. The hegemon must print more money, debase the currency, simply to pay interest on past printing. This is the definition of a terminal balance sheet. The fiscal decapitation, as documented by recent analysis, a structural tipping point is crossed when a nation spends more on debt repayment than on defense. The US is nearing this point, confirming a shift from military overextension to fiscal decapitation. The financial crown is being shed before the military empire falls. 2. The erosion of the exorbitant privilege. The world is actively rejecting the structural bypass that allowed the dollar to survive 1971. This is the market rejecting the fiat illusion. The de-dollarization pivot. The dollar's share of global foreign exchange reserves has plummeted from over 70% in 2000 to under 58% in recent reports. A rapid structural erosion of trust. The decline isn't linear. It's accelerating as geopolitical tensions force nations to seek sovereignty from US financial pressure. Trust is the only asset that cannot be printed. The BRICS counter-agenda, the BRICS nations and their expansion partners are not mounting a political challenge. They are building structural alternatives. The BRICS bridge payment network and increased bilateral trade settlements in local currencies directly attack the petrodollar structure. The demand for the dollar is being systematically manufactured out of existence. The gold barometer, central banks, notably those in BRICS and affiliated nations, are accumulating physical gold at historical rates, not seen since the Bretton Woods era. This is not investment, it is a sovereign hedging strategy. By reducing their holdings of US treasuries and increasing real assets, they are preparing for the default of the current structural design. They are validating the inevitability of the dollar's decline with their balance sheets. 3. The humiliation of domestic fragility. The dollar's decline isn't just external. It's a consequence of internal economic decay that the exorbitant privilege once masked. The de-industrialization tax, the long-term overvaluation of the dollar, a direct result of its reserve status, penalized domestic production, shipping manufacturing overseas, and creating a reliance on cheap imports. As one commenter correctly noted, using your currency as the global reserve often leads to deindustrialization. The financial empire sacrificed the industrial economy. The wealth concentration paradox. The Federal Reserve's role as the lender of last resort in a fiat system disproportionately benefits those closest to the money spigot, creating the massive wealth inequality that fuels social and political instability. The system rewards financial engineering over productive effort, trapping the professional class in a high-tax, high-debt environment. The human nature constant, as many observers have confirmed, the historical pattern holds because human nature never changes. The core drivers, greed, arrogance, and the overconfidence of the ruling elite, ensure that the same mistakes of overextension and financialization are repeated in every cycle, from Philip II's defaults to the modern era's quantitative easing. The structural flaw is fundamentally human. This is the diagnosis. This is the logic of collapse. The system is in terminal decline, accelerated by geopolitical tension and suffocated by internal debt. The question is not if the music stops, but how you strategically position yourself for the silence. The master plan of resistance, strategic stoicism. The system is designed to trap you with hope and paralyze you with fear. But we deal in strategy. Collapse is the norm. Panic is optional. For the masses, this transition is the final reckoning, the moment the debt-driven illusion evaporates. But for the strategist, the logic of collapse is merely a change in the rules of the game. When the system begins its creative destruction, sovereignty shifts from the nation-state to the individual with maximum optionality. The fall of a hegemon is not the end of the world. It is the ultimate structural opportunity for the prepared few. Your master plan must be one of active resistance, a systemic rejection of the agenda of maximum dependency. The empire demands overextension from its citizens just as it demands it from its balance sheet. To avoid being consumed by the collapse, you must reject the system's core temptation, maximum consumption and maximum credit. Your true power is not in maximizing paper wealth, but in minimizing structural friction. This is the structural design of the modern Stoic, disciplines of minimal dependency. This is the Stoic antidote against the illusion of abundance. 1. The discipline of asset sovereignty. The first act of resistance is a strategic flight from the Fiat Illusion and the paper debt instruments that will be sacrificed in the coming devaluation. Real assets versus paper promises. Prioritize real assets that have no counterparty risk. Physical gold and silver, stored in politically stable jurisdictions outside the financial orbit of the declining power. These metals are the only true store of value that central banks themselves are running back to. Your gold is worth more because the dollar is worth less. The productive hedge, beyond precious metals, your focus must be on productive assets. This includes tangible equity in private, non-financialized businesses, income-producing real estate with manageable leverage, or land that provides true, non-debatable utility. These assets produce value independent of the central bank's printing press. The structural short, the master plan, involves an implicit short of the fiat system. Every dollar of long-term, fixed-rate debt you pay down is an act of minimal dependency. Every investment made in a scarce real asset is a strategic vote against the agenda of perpetual debasement. 2. The discipline of location optionality. In a multipolar world, the greatest strategic asset you possess is the ability to choose your structure, to choose your sovereignty. The escape vector. Cultivate a location optionality. The legal, financial, and logistical ability to move your capital, your family, or your labor to jurisdictions that offer superior fiscal, legal, and political stability. If your entire structural security is tethered to a single, overextended state, you are the most vulnerable actor in this transition. This is not evasion. It is structural survival. Do not commit the fatal flaw of singularity, the tax arbitrage. Understand that states facing a debt crisis will resort to wealth taxes, capital controls, and confiscatory policies. Your strategy must involve holding assets and residency in places that are structurally shielded from the fiscal panic of the failing hegemon. Digital sovereignty, beyond geography. Master the tools of digital sovereignty, using decentralized systems for communication and value transfer that are structurally resistant to censorship and monitoring by overextended states seeking to maintain control. 3. The discipline of intellectual resistance. Finally, you must insulate your mind and your skills from the fragile service economy, the non-substitutable skill. Your skill must be real, non-substitutable, and immediately valuable in a crisis environment. Financial models, consulting, or marketing services dependent on cheap credit will vanish. Focus on skills rooted in engineering, logistics, physical production, energy, or resource management. Be necessary, not ornamental. Rejecting the illusion of growth. This is the core Stoic antidote. Reject the constant, low-grade propaganda of perpetual growth and consumption. Your well-being is not tied to the S&P 500's record high. It is tied to your minimal dependency on fragile infrastructure. Your personal balance sheet must prioritize reserves, low overhead, and high cash flow over maximum leverage. The next 50 years will reward those who need the system the least. The transition from the Portuguese real to the Spanish silver, from the Dutch guilder to the British pound, and from the pound to the dollar, all happened because the hegemon's exorbitant privilege became a structural liability. The logic of collapse is a certainty. Only the timeline is speculative. We are nearing the final verses of the dollar's dominance, and the time for denial is long past. This is not a moment for fear, but for calculated strategic stoicism. The system is designed to trap you with hope and paralyze you with fear. We deal in neither. We deal in data and design. If you recognize the structural design that history reveals, if you refuse to be caught by the tide of the inevitable reckoning, then you know what is required. Join the few who chose to see the structure. I'll wait for you here with the strategy.